All right, so we're going to pick up now and take a look at the reproductive system chapter in our textbook. Kind of the overall pattern here is we're going to talk about the initial movement toward becoming reproductively mature, starting at puberty, and then take a closer look at both the male and female reproductive tract, take a quick look at copulation and internal fertilization, and then finally take a relatively short look at different types of both permanent and temporary contraception. So in humans, as well as most other species, of vertebrates at least, we have separate sexes. We are a dioecious species that has both male and female individuals that are separate. There are gonads. And so in males, those gonads are the testes, and in females, those gonads are the ovaries. And that's going to be responsible for producing sex cells in both males and females. With the testes, males are going to produce sperm cells continuously beginning at puberty until more or less the day they die. Although the numbers of sperm cells they produce might not be the same or consistent throughout their lives, they do produce them continuously throughout their lives. Females, on the other hand, ovulate about once every 28 days or so, about once a month, beginning at puberty and ending at menopause. So we'll take a look at the production of egg cells as well here once we get through the male reproductive tract. Now, puberty itself is actually the result of brain maturation, believe it or not. This starts off with changes in the brain hormonally. The endocrine system is certainly involved here, beginning in females, typically between anywhere around 8 to 12 years of age, and in males, it's a little bit later, usually between about 11 and 14 years of age or so. There's going to be a huge change in the brain, the hypothalamus in particular, which we've seen so many times before in the endocrine system, in the nervous system, in various ways monitoring internal conditions inside our body, whether it's body temperature or chemical things as well. The hypothalamus is going to trigger a release of gonadotropin-releasing hormones, which is then going to cause a release of both luteinizing hormone, which is LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, which is FSH, from the anterior pituitary. So we see a chain reaction of events. GnRH allows for LH and FSH to be produced, and those two hormones are going to cause a production of testosterone in males and a production of estrogen and progesterone in females. And consequently, those last two hormones, three hormones, the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, all have a negative effect on GnRH and LH and FSH. So there's another one of these negative feedback cycles that we've seen before so many times to help us maintain homeostasis and maintain the right levels of these hormones in our bodies. So they're going to cause the production, like I said, of gametes, spermatogenesis as well as oogenesis, and then also testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. In males, beginning at puberty, some of the obvious changes, right? So the penis and testes are going to become larger. In females, there's going to be the beginnings of menstruation, breast development. In both sexes, there's going to be the beginnings of secondary sexual characteristics, so things that you typically associate for males or females. Increased body hair, deepening voice, broadening shoulders in males, those kinds of things. Those also begin at puberty, especially in response to production of the testosterone and estrogen. Now, in males, the testes, as I mentioned before, we're going to start off looking at the male reproductive tract because it's a bit simpler. In males, the testes are the gonads in males, and they're located outside the body in the scrotum for temperature control. So as it turns out, optimum sperm cell production happens slightly below 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or roughly 38 degrees Celsius. It needs to be a little bit cooler to maximize sperm cell production, so the scrotum allows that to occur because the body temperature is just a little bit lower outside of there. And also it can be adjusted, right? So if it's really cold, the testes can be held a little bit closer to the body. If it's really warm, they can be held a little bit further away from the body, and that's going to, again, help optimize the temperature for spermatogenesis. These sperm cells are produced in what are called seminiferous tubules through a process called spermatogenesis that we're going to see here very shortly. Those are the primary cells involved with producing the sperm cells. There are other structures associated with this. There is the vas deferens, there is the epididymis, there is the bulbourethral glands, prostate gland, as well as seminal vesicles. All three of those are glands that help produce the semen. There are various other structures in addition to the seminiferous tubules to allow not only for the production of sperm cells and semen, but also for copulation. So just to kind of get a quick look here at what's going on, we have the testes. Just outside of the testes is the epididymis. This structure here is for sperm cell storage. After they've been produced, they're going to kind of hang out here in the epididymis, where eventually they can be released or they can be reabsorbed by the body if they're not released. From the epididymis, there is the vas deferens, which carries sperm cells up and around past the various glands. into the urethra. So coming around here into the urethra, and then eventually from there on out from the body. Okay. So that's the overall structure of the male reproductive tract. We see some of the various glands I showed you or talked about before. Bulbar urethral glands we'll talk about. The prostate gland, which I'm sure everybody's heard of. Seminal vesicles, these also contribute. One of the aspects, these actually contribute fructose to semen production, so the sperm cells have a source of chemical energy as they're trying to produce ATP in order to swim. And then we'll take a look also at the testes, the seminiferous tubules inside of here, as well as the other supporting cells inside the testes too. Now inside the testes, if we take a look at one of them, do sort of like a cutaway view, what we see here inside one of these seminiferous tubules are three different kinds of cells. There are interstitial cells, which are these kind of triangular peach-colored cells here. They are the ones that are involved in producing testosterone, because you can't have sperm cell production unless you have testosterone. That's a very important feature. The second cell here is called the Sertoli cell. These cells are these larger ones here, kind of purplish-colored cells in this picture. These cells are involved in nourishing and helping the sperm cells get to the point where they're mature. And then finally we have spermatogonia, which are the bluish cells. They are the ones that go through spermatogenesis. They are the ones that go through meiosis. They are the ones that produce the sperm cells themselves. So we're going to take a look at that process here next. Right? So again, cutaway view of a seminiferous tubule. You could find interstitial cells, Sertoli cells, and also spermatogonia inside there as well. This picture is kind of cool. This is a scanning electron micrograph showing these wavy lines here, which are sperm cell flagella kind of sticking out from their environment. So the process of spermatogenesis starts off with diploid spermatogonia. And diploid, I know we haven't talked about that a lot in this class, but diploid means two sets of chromosomes. These cells have a set of chromosomes from an individual's father and a set of chromosomes from that individual's mother. So they have two sets of chromosomes, and these spermatogonia go through mitosis. But this is something which we really cannot overstate how important this is. Because when these spermatogonia go through mitosis, what they do is they divide into two cells. One of those cells is going to become another spermatogonium. So this cell is effectively replacing itself with another cell just like it. It's cloning itself in a way. The other cell that's produced is going to become what's called a primary spermatocyte, and that's the one that's eventually going to go through meiosis to produce the sperm cells. But the fact that these spermatogonia, every time they go through mitosis, are replacing themselves means that for males, they never run out of sperm cells. They always have a continuous supply of sperm cells beginning at puberty all the way up until the end of their life. They don't use them up because they're always making more. Okay? They're always making more precursor cells, which can then become spermatids. All right, so primary spermatocytes, again, are diploid. They have a total of 46 chromosomes, 23 from mom, 23 from dad. These primary spermatocytes are going to go through meiosis 1, and they're going to come out as secondary spermatocytes, which are now haploid. These cells have only 23 chromosomes total. And those chromosomes typically are going to be a mixture of both your mother's and your father's chromosomes. They're not going to be all of one or the other. They're going to be typically a combination of both mom's and dad's chromosomes. These secondary spermatocytes then immediately go through meiosis 2 to produce what are called spermatids. These spermatids, again, are haploid, and they're going to differentiate into, finally, the sperm cells. Sperm cells are the ones that are actually functional as the male gametes. Everything before that, even though it may be genetically, chromosomally a sperm cell, it might have 23 chromosomes, for example, it's not functional. It doesn't have all the parts and pieces you need to be a sperm cell until this last differentiation step. So here's the progression. We've got a spermatogonium, which goes through mitosis. It's going to produce not only a primary spermatocyte, it's also going to produce another spermatogonium. So there'll be another cell just like this, maybe sitting up here, which could then go through another round of mitosis. So you're always making more of these spermatogonia, right? Primary spermatocytes go through meiosis 1. You can see in this picture we've got 2 chromosomes from dad, 2 chromosomes from mom. It's a very simplified picture. We're not showing all 23 from each parent. We're showing 2 from each parent to produce secondary spermatocytes, which are haploid. One from one long one and one short one, one long one and one short one in this case. Secondary spermatocytes then go through meiosis 2 to produce 1, 2, 3, 4 spermatids. And each one of those 4 then also goes through a maturation process or differentiation process to produce the sperm cells that have all the bits and pieces that you need to have to function as a male gamete. All right, so just another picture showing this. Spermatogonia are going to go through mitosis. Eventually, we're going to have primary spermatocytes, secondary spermatocytes, which are also haploid. We have spermatids, which are now haploid, but not quite differentiated enough yet. Now we're going to have spermatids, which are in the process of differentiating, and then finally down here at the bottom we have the sperm cells, or spermatozoa is the more scientific name for them. Sperm is short for spermatozoa. These are now actually the functional male gametes down here on the bottom. So not too complicated, not too hard. Females are going to be fairly similar. A couple of other little wrinkles thrown in just for good measure, but otherwise a fairly similar process to males. The sperm cells themselves have four main parts. There is the head part, which is a really important part because it has a nucleus and also has those 23 chromosomes in humans. Right? The sperm cell doesn't contribute anything else to the zygote except for chromosomes. There's nothing else. There's no cytoplasm, there's no energy, there's no nutrients, there's no organelles. None of that stuff comes from the sperm cell. All of the other stuff comes from the egg cell. So the sperm cell's most important part is the head because that's where the chromosomes are, and that's what the zygote needs if it's going to form. We also have an acrosome here kind of at the front end. The acrosome contains some very powerful digestive enzymes to help penetrate the outer layers of the egg to allow the sperm cell to get in. There is a midpiece just behind the head which contains mitochondria. These sperm cells are going to be going through a huge amount of energy, making a ton of ATP, so they need to have a lot of mitochondria in order to be able to do that. That's kind of the power plant part of the sperm cell. And then everything behind that is the tail, or more specifically the flagellum, which is going to allow this thing to move where it needs to go. So again, not an overly complicated structure, but one that definitely needs to have all of its pieces and parts if it's going to be able to function in the way that it's supposed to. Now, if we look at how this is all controlled, right, spermatogenesis is controlled by hormones, of course. There is initially a release of GnRH from the hypothalamus, That's going to trigger a release of both LH and FSH from the anterior pituitary, and these two hormones are going to have different effects. One other thing that's kind of important to remember here is that in females, the same thing is happening. In females, so far, it's exactly the same thing as males. Hypothalamus makes GnRH, GnRH triggers LH and FSH, the exact same two hormones in both males and females. But the effects are very different because they have different target cells in males versus females. In males, LH is going to cause those interstitial cells to start producing testosterone, which of course is then needed for not only sexual characteristics, secondary sexual characteristics, but also for sperm cell production. Meanwhile, FSH is going to actually combine with the testosterone, the Sertoli cells, and the spermatogonia to begin the process of spermatogenesis. So you have to have both of those two hormones if you're going to be able to produce sperm cells as a male. Meanwhile, the way this is all controlled, we're going to take a look at another one of those lovely negative feedback systems like we've seen so many times pretty much in every chapter. We've seen it in the animal organization chapter. We saw it in the digestive system chapter. We've seen it in pretty much every chapter. Endocrine, we saw it with insulin and glucagon. Now we're going to see it with the reproductive hormones. So once testosterone levels are above some threshold, there's going to be, in combination with another hormone called inhibin, a decrease in production of GnRH and a decrease in production of both LH and FSH. So testosterone is sort of self-regulating itself. Once it gets to be abundant enough, it's going to shut down its own further production by affecting the levels of GnRH, LH, and FSH. So it's kind of a built-in fail-safe to make sure it stays at just the right level. Never gets too high, never gets too low. So again, another one of these pictures looks a little scary, but if we start up here at the beginning, it's actually fairly logical. We've got the hypothalamus producing your GnRH. This has an effect on the anterior pituitary to release LH and FSH. LH has an effect on testosterone levels in the interstitial cells, and FSH, as well as testosterone, produces those spermatogonia to start going through cell division to produce sperm cells. Now, once we have testosterone, now interstitial cells are making testosterone. That's going to stimulate sperm cell production. FSH and sperm cell production cause production of inhibin. And once we have inhibin, now the inhibin as well as the high levels of testosterone are going to feed back here, and they're going to shut down or slow down production of GnRH and slow down production of LH and FSH. And when these three levels of these three hormones start to go down, now there's going to be a decrease in production of testosterone. So you're not overproducing it. Okay, so it's a way to regulate and make sure you're always producing just the right amount at any given point in time. All right, as far as male accessory structures, we can take a look at the semen. These are glandular secretions produced by various glands throughout the male reproductive tract. They're going to be responsible for helping to carry the sperm out of the body as well as to nourish it, protect it, and help it do what it needs to do. The epididymis, like we saw before, is where sperm are stored until they can be released or broken down by the body. This is located just adjacent to the testes. It's the epididymis. We also have the vas deferens, which carries the sperm cells from the epididymis out to the urethra, which of course then is the passageway out to the body. In males especially, the urinary and reproductive tract is kind of the same thing in a way because the passageway to the outside of the body is the same. The urethra carries both sperm cells and semen, as well as urine outside the body in males, which is of course not the case for females. The various glands involved. These are, again, producing secretions to help the sperm cells do what they need to do. The prostate gland is going to produce an alkaline or basic fluid, which is going to help neutralize the acidity of the female reproductive tract so that the sperm cells and their enzymes don't get denatured prematurely. The prostate gland helps to neutralize the environment in the female's reproductive tract as the sperm cells arrive. The bulbourethral glands are going to produce a lubricant that's involved during intercourse, so it's a secretion that helps aid that process as well. And then finally, seminal vesicles are responsible for releasing fructose, which is the energy source for the sperm cell. So fructose, again, is a simple monosaccharide sugar. It can be broken down by mitochondria to produce ATP, which in the case of sperm cells is used to fuel the movement or the activity level of the flagellum. We talked about the urethra as well, carrying semen from the vas deferens out of the body through the tip of the penis, and that's kind of the last step. The penis, of course, is involved in copulation and deposition of sperm cells inside the female's reproductive tract. That's the case for mammals. It is the case for birds. It's the case for most reptiles, a few amphibians, and just a very, very small number of like sharks, and some of the fishes go through internal fertilization, but it's really uncommon in fishes to have that. In most cases, most fishes are external fertilization, but there's a few exceptions there. So that's it for the male reproductive tract. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut off and start up with the next section,